This video we're going to be reviewing Tighnari's Constellations. We're going to see which ones are good, which ones are worth it, and by how much should you go for them and stuff like that. So yeah, let's begin. So I did some calculations in this video. There are some quick calculations to see a little bit by like how much the constellations differ. And in these calculations, in all of them, I made these assumptions. Tighnari is going to have 60% crit rate, 120% crit damage, steady in all of them, unless obviously his crit rate is changed by one constellation. He's gonna be using the new Dendro set. It's called the Deepwood something, I forgot. It's basically just gonna give him Dendro damage bonus and decrease the resistance. This is outgoing damage, so the resistance is not really gonna matter. And he's also gonna be using his signature weapon, because if you're going first constellations, then you should probably get his weapon first and then go in for the constellations. Also, the rotation in these constellations is gonna be his elemental skill, then burst, then 3 charge attacks. This is one of his best rotations in my opinion until now, obviously because we don't know much about him, but this seems like it's a viable rotation. You know, you do your elemental skill and then do your burst, collects the particles, then use your charge attacks that you have quickly and then switch on to other supports, and by then when you finish you're gonna have your elemental burst ready again. So yeah, it's gonna be skill, burst, then 3 charge attacks. So yeah, these are all of the assumptions. Let's dive into the results. So starting off with the C1, first of all, as you guys can see here, we have skill, charge, then burst. This is the total damage. We just added up all of these numbers. This is the difference from C0. This is how much the constellation is better than C0. And this is the difference from the previous constellation. For example, by how much C1 is better than C0, by how much like C2 is better than C1, and so on. So C1 is just going to increase the crit rate of your charge attacks. So as you guys can see here, we had the crit rate here at 60%. And then at C1 we're gonna have it at 75% for all of your charge attacks. So this crit rate increase is gonna result in about a 5% damage increase. It's only gonna affect your charge attacks, so this is the biggest problem with C1 in my opinion. So why is this a problem is that it's only gonna increase the crit rate of your charge attacks, and as you guys can see here, your elemental burst damage is also very significant. It's almost equal. They're not really equal, but it's almost, you know, it's a big chunk in damage. As you guys can see here, it's like 61,000 in here, and here is 74,000. So your elemental burst and skill are still going to contribute to about like 50% of your total damage, or even here maybe around like a 40%, but it's still a big chunk of your damage. And since your elemental burst is still very important, you'd want to build crit rate for your elemental burst too. So you can't really just say, oh, I'm gonna only have like 40% crit rate, and then with the extra 15% from C1 I'm gonna have 55% crit rate. That's not really gonna work because your elemental burst is still gonna need crit rate. So you can't really build around it, or it's not really gonna help you build Tighnari in my opinion. It's just some extra crit rate only for your charge attacks. So it's a cool bonus, but it's not that big of a deal. Because I've seen a lot of people saying, oh, it's gonna help you build them a lot, you know, it's gonna, you know, you're gonna need less crit rate. In my opinion, you're not really gonna need less crit rate. You're probably still gonna need to build him with like at least 60% crit rate for him to be viable in my opinion. And since you're not really building around it and it's only like a 5% damage increase, obviously in my opinion C1 is not that good. So yeah, C1 is a skip. Now C2 is basically just gonna give you 20% free Dendro damage bonus. It's gonna last him for the whole rotation. You're not gonna worry about that. The opponents near the elemental skill, stuff like that, it's probably gonna last him for the full like duration. So yeah, it's basically a permanent 20% damage bonus. So as you guys can see here, the damage bonus here is 2.024. Here it's 2.224. It's changed in all of them. That's gonna result in a 14% damage increase, almost 15% from C0 and around 9% from C1. In my opinion, it's a cool constellation. It's not really gonna require you to do anything. Just use your elemental skill. Probably enemies are gonna be near it, and it's just basically a free 20% Dendro damage bonus. And that's pretty good, you know, that's huge. 20% elemental damage bonus is very, very huge. So yeah, in my opinion, I would say C2 is a good constellation. It's cool. Obviously, if you want to go for it, but it's not like that good. A 14% damage increase for C2, that's kind of a lot of wishes. It's like on the edge, but it's so cool. It's viable. Not very good, not bad, but it's there. Now C3 is just going to increase the level of your elemental burst. As I said before, his elemental burst is still going to be like a huge part of your damage. So a 3-level increase is going to be pretty good. It's pretty good that they didn't put the skill first and then the burst, because that would have been terrible. But yeah, these 3 levels from your elemental burst are going to result in around a 7% jump from C2 and around a 23% jump from C0. A pretty decent damage increase, not too much. For C3, I would say it's definitely not worth it, especially if you're going for C3 alone. Now, moving on to C4 is that when you use your elemental burst, you're going to gain 60 elemental mastery. And if you trigger a reaction with your elemental burst, you're going to gain an extra 60 elemental mastery. So it's a total of 120 elemental mastery. As you guys know, Tighnari is also going to convert elemental mastery to like damage bonus, which is pretty cool. So C4 is going to result in a 6% jump from C3. That's mainly because, as I said, Tighnari is going to convert elemental mastery to damage bonus, and his signature weapon is also going to convert elemental mastery to damage bonus. So with both of them, we're going to see a 6% damage increase, and from C0 a 31% damage increase. If you don't have his signature weapon, then it's probably going to be less. It's going to be much less, 2 or 3% damage increase. So C4 is not really looking that good, but I would say we still don't know for sure, because C4 is going to give you 120 elemental mastery, which is huge, and we still don't know if Dendro reactions are good, and also how much they scale with elemental mastery and stuff like that. So if we're relying on Dendro reactions on a team, for example, that we still don't really know, but if Dendro reactions are good and you're using them in a reactions team, 120 elemental mastery can be very, very valuable, and it's going to increase your damage much more than 6%. So C4, I would say we don't know yet, but it might be good. Now, C5 is going to increase the level of your elemental skill. It's definitely not good. The only thing that's going to scale with your elemental skill level is your elemental skill damage when you throw it, and it's not that big. Your elemental skill is not really going to be like a huge part of your damage, so it's definitely not going to be good. And as you guys are seeing here, it's only going to be like a 1% damage increase from C4, so it's definitely a skip in my opinion if you're going for C5 alone. C5 is just pretty much useless. And now finally moving on to C6, it's going to decrease the charge time for the rate arrows, which are your charge attacks. And you're also going to have one additional like cluster bloom arrow. Usually you're going to have 4, but with C6 you're going to have 5. So in my C6 calculations, I just added that one additional cluster bloom and that's it. And when I added it, we're going to see a 16% damage increase from C5 and around like 55% damage increase from C0. Now this can technically be more if you fire off like more arrows outside of this rotation, but in my opinion that's not viable, because even though his charge time is decreased, it's still going to be long, and I don't really see any downtime where Tighnari can charge off like one extra arrow just like that, because as I said before, you're just going to do your rotation. There's not really going to be much time. You just want to do your elemental skill, do your elemental burst, then charge attack, charge attack, charge attack, and then switch. By the time you do all of these supports, like say Bennett's burst for example, Yai Miko, Zhongli's shield, Zhongli's burst, whatever, 12 seconds are probably gonna pass by. His elemental burst cooldown is gonna be done because it's very short, and then you're just gonna repeat the same rotation again. You're gonna use the burst, skill, charge attack, charge attack, charge attack. So I don't think there's really any time where you can fit in like the extra arrow, so I didn't add it. In my opinion, the only thing that you're gonna benefit from C6 is that extra like cluster bloom arrow, and it's gonna result in around a 16% damage increase. If we added just like one extra arrow, it might reach out like 20% damage increase or 22%. So yeah, in my opinion, C6 is not really that important, especially for C6. If it was like C4 or C2, then I would say it might be good, but for C6, it's kinda not that good. In my opinion, it's a skip. Obviously, if you want to go for it, then you can, but it's not really looking like it's gonna be that valuable. So yeah, first Constellations, guys, honestly, I wouldn't really recommend any. I'd say C0 is fine, and we still really don't know, because in my opinion, that's just pure opinion. But in my opinion, Tighnari is looking like he's gonna be like a Dendro child. He's probably just gonna be like an enabler for Dendro reactions, so his own damage is probably not even like that important at all. That's my opinion. Pure speculation, I don't know anything, nobody knows yet, but I think it might be like this. But yeah, token damage wise, I would say probably none of them are worth it. As you guys can see here in the charts from the difference from the previous constellations, C6 is gonna have the most value, then we're gonna have C2 next to it, then C3, then C4, then C1, then finally C5. So maybe I would say C2 if you want to go for a little bit of his constellations. C6 I wouldn't really recommend it. It's like $1,000, which is huge, and it's not really worth it in my opinion. So yeah, personally I would say a C0. For minor investment I would say go C2, and if you want to C6 him, then best of luck. So yeah, that was the video guys. If you enjoyed it, please don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel. If you want to say anything, you'd want to recommend any other ideas, or you disagree with what I said in the video, make sure you leave it in the comments, and see y'all in the next video. Peace.